Good morning, everyone. A very happy new year, and welcome to Azure Dan the Cloud and Proud sessions. Start off with an introduction. So, my name's Daniel Baker, and I'm a Microsoft Partner Technology Strategist in Azure. I've got over 17 years' experience in delivering Microsoft official curriculum. Now, this ranges from the days of NT4, and from there I built on all of the client and server technology, System Center, Active Directory, but for the last couple of years I've pretty much specialised in public and private cloud. So why did we put this together? Well, the purpose of these sessions are to help you prepare for exam 7533. And I'm going to do this based on 5 fully interactive sessions. This isn't going to be death by PowerPoint. You're going to be working with me, and together we're going to become confident with the Azure portals and the Azure technologies. I want you to reach out too. I want to hear from you. It's all about lifelong learning, and everyone brings something to the table when it comes to Azure. So what are we going to do in today's session? Well, in today's session we want to establish virtual networks and connectivity. We'll begin with a brief overview of the Azure portals and then discuss some design decisions for planning resource groups. But our main focus of the session will be the design and implementation of virtual networks and inter-site connectivity. What will we need for this session? Well, we're going to need a personal computer running Windows, and we're going to need internet access. We're going to need an Azure subscription. Now bear in mind this is 5 sessions, each will build on the last, and each is scheduled to be a couple of hours in duration. Because of this, what you'll probably be best with is an MSDN subscription or an enterprise subscription running from a virtual machine, so it doesn't interfere with your normal production workload. As otherwise, it might not be the healthiest option, but biscuits are optional and certainly help me get through these sessions. By the end of today's session, we want to be able to navigate the Microsoft Azure portal, plan virtual networks in Azure, implement and manage virtual networks, and configure inter-site connectivity within the Microsoft Azure world. For our session outcome, what we plan to have is a production virtual network and a development virtual network. Now these 2 virtual networks are going to be connected using a site-to-site virtual private network. Okay, now this will be using a pre-shared key. So what this means is we're going to have to go in, we're going to have to design our IP address structures, we're going to have to create our virtual machine gateways, we're going to have to establish connectivity between the 2 gateways, and finally what we're going to do is we're going to allow our external machine to connect into our production network via a point-to-site VPN. Now to use this, what we're going to have is certificate authentication. Okay, so to summarize, by the end of this session we will have looked at most of the networking concepts of Azure and how we can implement it. Let's begin. So I want to begin, like every good cookery program, by showing you one that I made earlier. This is the result of our 5 sessions, and by the end of it you will have something very similar. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at what we've got. We can see that we're going to have multiple VNets, and the VNets are going to be connected via gateways. We can see that we're going to have a point-to-site connection going into our production network. Now from here we're going to also have virtual machines, we're going to have storage and shares, we're going to have databases, and we're going to have a website. Okay, all of this we will build together. Now all this has been done in Microsoft's new portal, and this is very similar to a System Center dashboard and fully customizable. You make this look and feel for you. Whatever works for you, it can accommodate it. And what I mean by that is, look, I can change my color scheme simply by double clicking on the screen. I can navigate through the portal using keyboard commands. So look, if I just hold shift and question mark, you can see that I've got my keyboard shortcuts, and this would allow me to navigate through the portal. Now, one of the things I think that's really cool about this new portal is how easy it is to provision resources. If I move over to the left hand side and we'll just click on this little burger and expand this, you can see that I can go in and I can see my resource groups, all resources, recent tasks, and I can go into some of the things that I've used before. I can focus on my subscriptions, my databases, virtual machines. However, if I come to the top and click on New or press the letter N on my keyboard, I can go in and focus on our marketplace. Now you'll see that this is broken down into a number of sections: compute, web and mobile, data and storage, data and analytics, etc. If I click on compute, it then expands into a new blade and shows me some of the options that I've got for Azure Compute. You can see that I've got Microsoft in there, I've got some Linux stuff in there too, there's some Dynamics, Oracle databases, and if I click on Search All, I'll be able to focus down onto many more. Now what's really good about this marketplace is the fact that I can search for solutions. So if I go in and look for a SharePoint farm and hit return, it then changes and brings to light all of the options that I've got for SharePoint. So I can create a non-highly available farm and a highly available farm, just to highlight two. If I click on the highly available farm, it's going to expand into a new blade. It's going to give me an overview of what this technology is going to do. And from there, if I hit create, it's going to open up a new blade and present me with a wizard based solution. So all I'm doing is filling in the blanks. I'm going to give it a name, I'm going to specify how my infrastructure works, my Active Directory settings, my database settings, etc. We come back. If we just start closing down our blades, this is always expanding. Okay, there are solutions being added to the portal all of the time, and one of the things that we'll look at in future sessions is how we can use GitHub to bring some of these templates into our portal to build new solutions. One thing I should probably highlight is not everything is achievable in this new portal. At some point we may have to go to the second portal to achieve some of our desired tasks. So let's just come out of this, minimize that down, and just quickly move over to our secondary portal. Now our secondary portal is perhaps one that you're more familiar with if you've been using Azure for any period of time. You'll instantly see that this navigation bar here has become a lot longer over the years, but pretty much focuses down on all of the key technologies. Okay, so again, we've got web apps, virtual machines, mobile services, cloud services, etc. Okay, so for the majority of our work we'll be using the new portal. However, we may come back to this portal to achieve certain tasks. Okay, so I think with that done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down, I'm going to go into my virtual machine, and I'm going to connect into my new portal. Okay, so this is a brand new subscription. I'm using my MSDN subscription. Okay, and from here we're going to go ahead and build our Azure Cloud. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do then is we're just going to clean up our dashboard a little. So yours should look very similar to mine, especially if you're using a new subscription. So I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this down. I'm then going to go ahead and just close down some of these tiles. Okay, I'm going to start off with a very clean dashboard and we'll build it from scratch. Now I personally prefer the darker theme, so I'm going to double click and bring the darker theme dashboard in. So the first thing that we want to do then, guys, is as we build our environment, we want to be mindful of the fact that each resource that we create goes into a separate resource group. Now, try and think of a resource group like an Active Directory OU. It allows us to bunch our resources together. It also then allows us to monitor and assign people access to it using role-based access control. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build a resource group that looks after our core network. So there's two ways that I can do this. I can either navigate through new, or on my keyboard I'm going to go ahead and hold down G and R. And you'll see there it comes up with resource groups. Now yours should be empty. I have a default web resource group in there from a previous project, but we'll just ignore that. You should have nothing in there. What we're going to do is we're going to go up and click on add, and from here it's going to open up a new blade. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and for the resource group name I'm going to call mine core network. Okay, and we can see that we've got a tick in there, it's fine. For the subscription, I'm going to go ahead and use my Visual Studio Enterprise with MSDN subscription. And for my resource group location, I'm going to go ahead and put mine into Central US. Now from here we can see that I'm going to pin this onto my dashboard and create. So I'm going to go ahead and build this. Now this will take literally seconds to build, and we can see that it's already done. So with that resource group created, we can see that we've got our essentials at the top. So from our essentials we can see we've got our subscription name, the last deployment, our subscription ID, and the location. If I go into settings we can see that we've got our properties, we've got the users that have access to it. So what's happening there is with our resource groups we're employing role-based access control. So we can go in and we can select what users have access to the resources hosted inside this resource group. Okay, so nothing in there at the moment, but we can see that we're going to get some monitoring. We've got some alert rules that we can create, and we can keep an eye on billing. So it's also a very good way to allow us to monitor how much certain areas of our network is going to cost. If I close that blade down, I can then go ahead and edit this. And if I go into customize, I'm just going to make that a 2x1. And from there I'm done. So with my resource group created, what I now want to do is I want to go ahead and start thinking about my virtual networks. Okay, so I'm going to click on my resource group, and from my resource group I want to go ahead and click on add. So what I'm interested in here is building my first virtual network, and again it's taken me into my marketplace. So the quickest way that I'm going to do this is from my search bar just type in virtual network, and we can see the top result is the virtual network, and it will change focus to all of my options, and we can see that I can build virtual networks, virtual network gateways, local network gateways, and so on. We're going to go ahead and build a virtual network. So on our virtual network it says it will create a logically isolated section in Azure with this networking service. We can securely connect to it to our on-premise data center or a single client machine using an IPsec connection. Virtual networks will make it easy for us to take advantage of scalable, on-demand infrastructure of Azure while providing connectivity to data and applications on-prem, including systems running on Windows Server, mainframes, and Unix. So let's go ahead and hit create. Let's move the blade over. And like we said before, this is all wizard driven, so we're just going to go ahead and fill in the blanks. So I'm going to call this C&P prod, so Cloud and Proud Production VNet. I'm going to make sure that I get a little tick in there so it's happy. And for my address space, I'm going to come down and I'm going to put my production network onto the 192. Oh, let's just make sure my numlock is on. My 192.168.10.0, and I'm going to put that on a /24 network. So we know from our IPv4 subnetting days that a /24 gives us 254 options. Now from here I'm going to create a subnet. I'm going to call this subnet production. And I don't want production to use the whole address space because I want to use some of the addresses to build my gateway. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say that the production subnet can have 192.168.10.0, but put that on a /25, so half my available addresses. Okay, from here I'm going to come down and say OK. I want to make sure that it's going into my core network. I want to make sure that my subscription is right, and my location, I'm going to leave that in Central US. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and create. Okay, so that will take a few minutes, and we'll be able to see the progress on our dashboard. Okay, so we can see that our resource has been created. We've got our Cloud and Proud production VNet. Now if I click on this, it's going to open up a blade, and it's going to show me my VPN connections, and it's going to show me my essential information. So I can see I'm on the core network in Central US using my Visual Studio Enterprise subscription. I can see my subscription ID, my address space, and my DNS server. It's fine, there's lots of information on here, but again, the beauty of this new Azure portal is the fact that I can customize my dashboard. So I don't actually want all of this info. What I do want is this particular tile here. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose to pin this to my dashboard. I'm also interested in my address space. So if I right click my address space, I can pin that to my dashboard. I'm interested in my subnet. So if I right click my subnets, I can pin to my dashboard. And I'm going to want to play with my DNS servers and my DNS service later on in this session. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that to my dashboard too. Now what this allows me to do is it allows me to go in and remove this resource and clean up my dashboard. So I want this VPN connection, but for these guys here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to customize. And I'm going to make these slightly smaller, and I'm going to move my address space, and I'm going to move my subnets, and I'm going to move my DNS server all over to this location. Okay, so we're there. We can see that our VNet has been created. Now we don't have a gateway yet. We're going to come back to the gateway in a moment. But what I now want to do is I want to go in and I want to build a second VNet for my development section. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose to add. And just like before, I'm going to search for virtual networks. I'm going to select virtual network, and just like before, we're going to complete the wizard. So in this instance, I want it to be my Cloud and Proud DevNet. Okay, my address space for Cloud and Proud DevNet is going to be 192.168.20.0/24. I'm going to create a subnet called development, and I'm going to put my subnet CIDR block on 192.168.20.0, and just like before, we'll do a /25. Let's say OK. Again, we want it to go into the resource group core network. The subscription's fine, the location's fine. So in this instance, I'm going to say create. Close this down, and we're going to wait for this to be built. So again, this is going to take a few minutes, so we'll pause the video and we'll come back. And we're back. We can see that our development network is created. So just like before, what I now want to do is pin this key information onto my dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, pin to dashboard. I want to pin my address space, my subnets, and my DNS server. So again, let's go back, let's clean this up. So I'm going to customize, I'm going to make this a 2B1, and I'm going to move this underneath here. I'm going to bring in my subnets, make it a 2x1, and pull this guy underneath. And for my DNS server, just like before, 2x1, and we're going to pull him into place too. Okay, so we're done. So at this point, we now have our two virtual networks. Okay, we have a virtual network which we're going to use for production machines. We have a virtual network which we're going to use for development machines. What we don't have at the moment is connectivity between the two. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, I'm just going to clean up this resource. We're going to go ahead and we're going to now provide connectivity between these two machines. Now the way that we're going to do that is by creating a gateway. So I'm going to come down, and first off I'm going to start with production. So I'm going to come down, I'm going to click on my tile, and we can see that the connection type that I want to create is going to be a site-to-site. Okay, so this is predominantly where you would connect up to your on-prem router. Okay, point to site would be a single machine, so a laptop or a desktop, a singular connection. Okay, so we're going to say site to site. The local site that I want to connect to is, I'm going to want to go ahead and I want to connect to my Cloud and Proud development. Now the VPN gateway IP address is, we're going to put this onto 1.1.1.1. Now the reason we're doing this at the moment is it's a placeholder. Until our gateway is created, we won't have a proper address. So we need to come back to this to create connectivity at a later stage. Okay, so my client address space is, I know development is on the 192.168.20.0/24. Okay, so that's fine. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to now come down and I want to create my gateway immediately. Now in order to do this, I'm going to need to create a subnet. So I'm going to click on my optional configuration. We can see that I want dynamic route. I'm going to use the default size because we won't have much traffic, but what I need to do is, under my subnet, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to change this to a /29, and we'll see that I now get the tick. From here I'm going to say OK, OK, and OK. And what will happen is it will submit the deployment and my gateway will begin to build. So again, this can take up to an hour. The reason it's going to take up to an hour is because what it's now doing is it's building a virtual machine running Windows. It's then putting on routing and remote access and configuring all of the routes needed to get from one VNet to the other. So I'll pause the video and we'll return in an hour. And we're back. We can see that our gateway has now been created. We can see the public IP address and everything appears to be up and running. Now it's not going to show us connected to our remote site. The reason it's not going to show us connected to our remote site is we haven't configured this side yet. So let's go ahead and do that. Before we do, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this gateway IP address. Okay, so we have a gateway up and running, we have a public IP address, and we're going to use this to connect from dev into production. So if I go ahead to my dev VNet, let's click in there. Again, we're going to do a site-to-site connection. Okay, and the local site that we're going to connect to is Cloud and Proud Production. Now we know in order to get to Cloud and Proud Production, we're going to use that public IP address that's just been created on the gateway. And if you cast your mind back to earlier, we put a placeholder in there. So once this gateway has been created, we can then take its public IP address and update the previous gateway that we created before. So the client address space for production is on the 192.168.10.0/24 network. Okay, so we've now got our name, the correct address and the address space that we're going to be using. We're going to come across and we're going to choose to create the gateway immediately. And to do this, if you cast your mind back, what we need to do is modify our subnet. So we're going to click on our subnet and we're going to choose a /29, and we'll see as we click off we get a green tick. It's now happy with that because we have the available addresses. We can say OK, OK, and OK, and what will happen is it will submit that for deployment, and this gateway will now begin to create. Just like before though guys, it's going to take between 20 minutes and an hour as the virtual machines are created, routing and remote access is built, and the connections are established. So we'll pause the video and we'll come back. And we're back. We can see that our second gateway is now being created and we have a new public IP address in there. So like I said before, what we're now going to do is we're going to take this IP address and we're going to update the placeholder that we originally put in our initial design. So let's go into this one. Let's come across to our local site and we're going to replace the 1.1.1.1 with the new public IP address. Let's just let that update. So it's submitting the deployment and we'll just wait for that to update. So while we're waiting for that to update, let's just make sure we're happy with what we're saying. So on this side we've got our production and on this side we've got our development. So what we're saying is in order for development to get to production, then what needs to happen is it needs to go via production's gateway. In order for production to get to development, then it needs to go via development's gateway. So let's just make sure that that's now updated. And we can see that we now have that new VPN gateway IP address. Okay, so we now have our routes configured. Okay, what needs to happen is we now need to establish the pre-shared key between the two sites. Now in order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to have a look and we're going to create a pre-shared key between these two endpoints. So I'm going to go over to my second portal, and from my second portal what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into my virtual network. So you can see that we've got our group core network, so it's taking our resource group name, and then we've got the Cloud and Proud DevNet and the Cloud and Proud production. Okay, if I click on this and click back a level, we can also see that we now have our local networks too. We've got our local network for production and our local network for development. Okay, so what we need to do is we now need to construct a PowerShell string that would allow these two VNets to connect. So I've gone ahead and in Notepad I've created two strings. Okay, and what you need to do is you need to now go ahead and you need to construct something similar to this using the names that you created. So we can see that I'm using set Azure VNet gateway key, and the VNet name was that original group core network Cloud and Proud production. So you'd need to change that to the name that you come up with. The local network site is connecting to development. Okay, so it's connecting to the Cloud and Proud development, and we're going to use a shared key of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H 1, 2, 3, 4. Once that command is run, we then want to run the set Azure VNet gateway key, this time for the DevNet, which is going to connect to the Cloud and Proud production. So again, what you need to do to make sure that this works is replace the VNet names for the names that you created and the local network site names that you created. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to come into my Azure PowerShell. We're just going to wait for this to initialize. Let's just move our screen around a little so we can see everything. And from here, what I want to do is I want to add an Azure account. Okay, so I'm just going to tab to complete. From here, I'm now going to authenticate into my Microsoft Azure subscription. So Daniel at danielbaker.info, and I'm just going to say that's my personal account, and authenticate in. Okay, now give a minute to authenticate, and then from there we're going to go ahead and we're going to just paste in our commands. So set Azure VNet Gateway key, the VNet name, the local network site name, and the shared key that we're going to be using. Okay, we'll just let that run. Okay, and we can see that that completed successfully. So with that done, let's go ahead and select the second one, copy, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that into Azure 2, and we'll just allow that to run. Now when that comes back as a success, what we'll do is we'll go back into our new portal, we'll wait a couple of minutes, and we should see that those two VNets are then created. Okay, so we can see that our second one is now created. So what we should see is a connection in our portal. So let's go ahead and go back into our portal, and I'm just going to go ahead and refresh. And once that's refreshed, what we should see is the two VNets have a connection between them, and they will be able to route between each other. Let's just wait for the portal to wake up. And there we go, guys, we can now see that we have a successful connection between the two. So prod can connect to dev, dev is connected to prod. So we've got a fully routed network now. Now we're not going to see the benefits of this till the next session when we start populating it with virtual machines, but I hope you can appreciate that the network is now in place. So moving forward, what we now want to do is make sure that we can have a singular machine connect up into our production network, and we're going to do this by creating a point to site VNet. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to choose to build a point to site VPN connection. Now what I'll need to do is I'll need to give it an address space. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say for machines connecting in, they can be on 192.168.30.0/25. From here, let's say OK, and it'll submit the deployment. So again, what we'll now do is we'll wait a few moments for this to complete, and then we'll go in and we'll configure our virtual machine to connect into our Azure cloud. Okay guys, so we can see that that's now completed. It doesn't mean that we can connect in just yet. What we now need to do is we now need to go ahead and configure some settings for the client machine to be able to connect in. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the client. And from there you can see that one of the things that we have to do before we start downloading the client VPN tools is we need to go ahead and manage some certificates. So I'm going to click on manage certificates, and from there you can see that it wants us to upload. So let's just come back out of here for a moment. In order for this to work, we need to have a certificate pair. So we need to have a root certificate and we need to have a client certificate. The client and the root will be on the connecting machine, and the root certificate will be uploaded into the gateway. So what this means is it means that when we connect up using the VPN, we don't have to supply any credentials. So let's take a look at this. So I'm going to go into a MMC. So I'm going to go into a Microsoft Management Console on my machine. And from here, what we want to do is we want to open a snap-in. So we want to open the snap-in, and we want to add certificates for my user account. So we're going to tie in the certificates for my user account. And at the moment we can see that there's nothing in our personal certificate store. So this is what we're now going to do. We're going to create some certificates. And we can do this using Visual Studio. But what I've actually done is I've created a cut down version that I'll put on the Cloud and Proud website for you to download and you to run also. So if I go into my File Explorer, then on my C drive, what I've got is I've got a folder called MakeCert, and in there I've got the MakeCert executable and a little batch file that I've created. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the batch file, and I can see that what I've done here is using the MakeCert command, I'm going to create a Cloud and Proud root certificate using the secure hash algorithm using 256-bit. A length of 2048, and I'm going to extract it as Cloud and Proud root. Once that's done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a client certificate that is derived from the root, also using a secure hash algorithm at 256-bit. Okay, so again, I will put this on the Cloud and Proud website for you to download, and you can emulate it too. What it means is, instead of typing any complex commands, we can now just go ahead and double click, and that's now created. You can see that the certificate has been extracted, and if I go back into my MMC and hit a refresh, I've got my certificates that are now in there. So we said that the client would have the root and a client, and we would upload the root into Azure. So let's go ahead and do that. So back into my portal, back into my client connection, let's manage certificates, and from there we're going to upload and select the file that's just been created. So from our C drive, from MakeCert, we've got the Cloud and Proud root. Let's go ahead and allow that to upload, and we can see that that certificate is now uploading into our cloud. Okay, and we can see that that VPN certificate has now been uploaded. So our Cloud and Proud root is now on the system. So what we can do is we can go ahead and create our VPN client package. So again, that's now going to generate the package. It will take a few moments to compile, and then it will invite us to download. And here we go. We can see, do we want to run or save the file? So I'm going to go ahead and say run. Okay, and Windows protected my PC because it's an executable, but I'm going to go ahead and click on more info, and I'm going to choose to run anyway. So user account control, we'll say yes to. Do you wish to install the VPN client for the group core network Cloud and Proud production? So I'm going to say yes, and once that's installed, let me just wait for that to finish. Once that's installed, what we can now do is come down to our network, and we'll be able to see that we've got our Cloud and Proud VPN. So if I click on my Cloud and Proud and click on my VPN and choose to connect, we can see that the Cloud and Proud VPN client opens, and we'll choose to connect. Now, because we're using certificates, at no point will we need to enter any credentials, and we can now see that that's connected. So to prove this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a command prompt, and on my command prompt, if I run an IP config, we should see that I've got two IP addresses, and one of those IP addresses should come from the 192.168.30 range. So if we come down, we can see that our point-to-point protocol adapter for the group core network Cloud and Proud production has got an IP address of 192.168.30.2, okay, with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.255, which effectively means that it's bound to just that single address. If we go back into our portal and we hit a refresh, then what we will see is not only do we have our site-to-site connection, but we now have a point-to-site connection going into our production network too. And we can see that we've got one client connected. In this session, we focused on building our core network infrastructure. We began by building the production and development VNets. We then configured the gateways and built a site-to-site VPN using a pre-shared key between them. Finally, we created a point-to-site VPN using certificate authentication, which allowed our external machine the ability to connect into our Azure network. In the next session, we will look at populating our production virtual network with virtual machines. I'd like to thank you for your patience and hope you enjoyed the session and look forward to seeing you in the next one.